Okay. Okay, folks. We're back. Thanks for bearing with that brief interlude. um, it is, as I've mentioned before, I'm on an ancient rickety laptop that I desperately need to replace. But for sentimental reasons, I continue to use it far beyond the amount of time that's advisable. So that does create certain challenges. Uh, One of which is the fact that it does not like to stream very much. But I think we'll be good for the remainder of our time between now and 6. So we've got an hour and a half. Let's play some games. So this I chose as an example of games being interactive systems. This is Parable of the Polygons. And you may or may not know this one. It's by two wonderful creators, Vihart and Nikki Case. Nikki Case creates a number of games that are mixtures of kind of text explanations that talk about a particular real world issue or topic, and they're mixed with little kind of interactive examples, things that you can play with that really help kind of reinforce the concepts that are being discussed. So there's sort of a mixture of, an essay, traditional essay with interactive elements. And in fact, Nikki Case has a whole website with examples of this. And I'm going to show you it briefly. Explorable explanations. So there's a ton more where this came from, and I think this is a really great collection that shows some examples of how using interactive media, using games and simulations, and mixing that in with more traditional forms of conveying information can really help convey a concept, help you make an argument. Gotta get a little of that sweet, sweet procedural rhetoric in the mix, right? Who doesn't love it? So this is a playable post on the shape of society. And this was the first one that this duo did that really, at least to me, seemed to garner a lot of attention. This was where I first heard of their work. This is a story of how harmless choices can make a harmful world. These little cuties are 50% triangles, 50% squares, and 100% slightly shapist. But only slightly. In fact, every polygon prefers being in a diverse crowd. So here's a little unhappy triangle. Let's drag and drop. Much happier now. And so you can play around with these examples. You can also reset them. So you can only move them if they're unhappy with their immediate neighborhood. Once they're okay where they are, you can't move them until they're unhappy with their neighbors again. They've got one simple rule. I want to move if less than a third of my neighbors are like me. And here's some illustrative examples. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Much nicer. So here's an unhappy triangle. Only 1 out of 6 neighbors are like me, less than 1/3. Oh no. Here's a happy camper. 2 out of 6 neighbors are like me, exactly 1/3. And then, of course, they also have the mass state, which is all neighbors are like me. And if they have no neighbors, they're also meh. Harmless, right? Every polygon would be happy with a mixed neighborhood. Surely their small bias can't affect the larger shape society that much. Well, drag and drop unhappy polygons until nobody is unhappy. Just move them to random empty spots. Don't think too much about it. Okay. Let's give it a whirl here. So, something like that. Uh-oh. Trouble. A little better. Very good. I'm not too happy. You're okay. Whoop. Okay. Oh, we did it. Okay, so nobody's unhappy anymore. Success. We've eliminated unhappiness in this simulation. And our shape society becomes super segregated. Dang. Yep, it sure did. Sometimes a neighborhood just becomes square, and it's not their fault if no triangles want to stick around. And a triangular neighborhood would welcome a square, but they can't help it if squares ain't interested. Yeah. In this next bit, unhappy shapes automatically move to random empty spots. There's also a graph that tracks how much segregation there is over time. Run this simulation a few times. What happens? Okay. So let's put these shapes in motion. So they're just going to be automatically moving if they're unhappy, moving to a new random spot. Yeah, so we've just steadily, as that's happening, as each of those shapes is individually operating by these rules, we end up with an increasing amount of segregation, and they're sort of clumping into these clusters, right? What's up with that? These are good shapes, nice shapes. And yet, though every individual only has a slight bias, the entire shape society cracks and splits. Oh, see, we're getting a little cascade here, one by one. Oh, yep. Yeah. That's how we end up with a lot of meh. A whole lot of meh. Small individual bias can lead to large collective bias. Equality is an unstable equilibrium. The smallest of bias can push a whole society past the tipping point. Well, what if we taught these shapes to have zero bias? Or if you're feeling particularly nasty today, more bias. Use the slider to adjust the shape's individual bias. So here we can still tell them to start moving automatically, but we also have a little variable we can change here, which is the rule for these individual shapes. I'll move if less than 33% of my neighbors are like me. So that's kind of the baseline of where we started. So if we move that down to 0, then we're good as we are, right? Then they stayed where they were at the start because they are happy. But did that kind of solve the problem? We could play around a bit. Do a new board. New board. Yeah, it's still, still having pretty similar problems to what we had before, I would say. Just for the heck of it. Let's go with something like this. So these can be some interesting things to, to play around with just to kind of see what effect they'll have, right? Notice how much more segregated things become when you increase the bias beyond 33%. What if the threshold was at 50%? Seems reasonable for a shape to prefer not being in the minority. So in this case, these ones are happy, but the blues are upset. In this case, triangles are happy. So yeah, problem solved. But in this case, we've kind of increased that slider a bit more. Right? So yeah. So we can see that the outcomes are going to be affected by the amount of bias of these individual shapes. So yeah, just turn everyone's bias down to 0, right? Haha, nope. The real world doesn't start anew with a random shuffling of citizens every day. Every day, you're not shuffling. And here's an illustration of that. So this simulated world begins segregated into these clusters. What happens when you lower the bias? Nothing, right? Because they're satisfied where they are, but where they are starts off segregated. So, See what doesn't happen? No change. No mixing back together. In a world where bias ever existed, being unbiased isn't enough. We're going to need active measures. What if shapes wanted to seek out just a little more variety? So now these shapes want to move if more than 90% of their neighbors are like them. Okay. We're getting somewhere. Whoa. Even though each polygon would be okay with having up to 90% of their neighbors that are like them, they all mix together. Let's see this play out on a larger scale when we change the amount of bias and anti-bias for all shapes. So once again, we've got a scenario where this environment starts segregated. What happens when shapes demand even the smallest bit of diversity? So now we have two variables we can play around with. So I'll move if less than 10% or greater than 80% of my neighbors are like me. Let's start a moving. Yeah, so we can see from the graph here that kind of change over time, right? So that's moving the amount of segregation on a downward trend instead of upward. All it takes is a change in the perception of what an acceptable environment looks like. So, fellow shapes, remember, it's not about triangles versus squares. It's about deciding what we want the world to look like and settling for no less. Get them all in the box of friendship. Whoa. We're getting there. Woohoo! At first, going out on your own can be isolating, but by working together step by step, we'll get there. Finally, a big old sandbox to play around in. So we could play around with this kind of rule set and again make adjustments and let them kind of automatically move based on these rules and see what kind of outcomes we get, both in terms of final composition if things kind of settle, and also the rate of change and the amount of segregation over time. So wrapping up, small individual bias can lead to large collective bias. When someone says a culture is shapist, they're not saying the individuals in it are shapist. They're not attacking you personally. The past haunts the present. Your bedroom floor doesn't stop being dirty just because you stop dropping food all over the carpet. Creating equality is like staying clean. It takes work, and it's always a work in progress. Demand diversity near you. If small biases created the mess we're in, small anti-biases might fix it. Look around you. Your friends, your colleagues, that conference you're attending. If you're all triangles, you're missing out on some amazing squares in your life. That's unfair to everyone. Reach out beyond your immediate neighbors. And there you have it. So that's Parable of the Polygons by Weihart and Nikki Case. And there's lots of other great resources down here. If you're to check it out, you can get there at ncase.me/polygons. Has some great links for places you can donate to. As you can see, this really kind of caught on and was signal boosted by a lot of different outlets for good reason. I think it was a really great example of mixing in sort of games and interactive simulation with a more traditional kind of essay format. And one of the things that I personally like about this a lot is that it's very transparent about the rules of the simulation here. Because one of the challenges with simulation, so there's an opportunity, of course, to make things interactive, but because the computer can kind of handle all these rules via code, also some more of those kind of rules can be hidden or sort of obscure and not obvious when you're playing it. And I think it's important when you're trying to make games for change or games that are purporting to represent the way something works in reality in terms of how people behave or how a certain system functions. It's good to be transparent about like the rules that your simulation operates under, and even if you're able to, as a creator, provide some context to why you set up those rules that way. Maybe you did some research. Maybe you spoke to particular people who had lived experience with the topic who gave you some insight and input on it, and you sort of shaped the rules based on what you found and what you heard from others. Maybe it's just based on your own personal lived experience with a topic. Maybe it is just based on the way you think something works, or a bias that you have about it, right? Or just your personal subjective understanding of a topic. That's okay too. I think, anyway. You're okay with me if you do any of those things. But what I do like to see as a player and as a creator is for creators to be really transparent about their own biases, because you can't create a simulation, you can't create a set of rules like this about how a system works or how these, in this case, these little shape characters behave without making some assumptions. And if you're drawing an analogy to a real world topic, you know, people who play/read Parables of the Polygon, Parable of the Polygons, you may or may not agree with some of the of what's represented here, and that's okay. But the authors of this do give you the opportunity to at least very clearly understand the argument that they're making, I think. And it's, you know, it's not for you to necessarily need to agree 100% with it, but at least you can easily understand what's being said. So I think that that's a really effective way to deal with a topic like this. So that's one down. Parable of the Polygons. Let's move along. This was one of my games. We're not, as I said, we're not going to play any of my games on the stream today, but you're welcome to check it out on your own. If you do, I would love to have you leave me a comment. This is a game I did called Glass Ceiling. That's a multiplayer game. You know, one of the There's different sort of terms that get applied to some of these styles of games. As I mentioned, games for change sometimes gets used for like activist games or political games. Um, Serious games sometimes is used as well. I hear that less often these days, but I think it's still that term still is around. And I think serious games, meaning maybe games that tackle a serious topic, or sometimes are trying to like educate people about a serious topic. Um, some people kind of have an adverse reaction to that moniker, but there can be really fun games still that tackle serious topics, and I think that Thoughts and Prayers, the game, is a wonderful illustration of that. So if you're somebody who thinks that games are fun, as I think that games are often fun. I don't feel that they need to be 100% of the time, but that can be one of the advantages of them, right? So maybe you can do an irreverent, fun take on even on a serious topic if you kind of approach it thoughtfully and respectfully still. So here's Thoughts and Prayers, the game. America faces an epidemic of mass shootings. It's up to you to stop them with the power of your thoughts and prayers. Here we go.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Oops. There you have it. Thoughts and Prayers, the game. Uh, in a far shorter amount of time and a much kind of snappier uh, play experience, they've managed to make, I think, a really strong point in a funny and fun way. So, yeah. Um, Games can still be fun and entertaining, even when dealing with topics that are decidedly neither fun nor entertaining. So, embodiment is a really useful uh, element of games. Of course, we can empathize with characters and stories that we're reading or viewing in film or listening to. But when we actually get to embody those characters and kind of walk around in their shoes, then that can enhance that experience in some ways when done effectively. So this is a game by a designer I really admire, Rosa Carbo Mascarell, and this is A Woman Goes to a Private Games Industry Party. Let's give it a shot. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Okay, there we go. Do you have a boyfriend? What about a girlfriend? Have you ever had a threesome? Hey, remember me? You never got back to me about that second date. You still up for it? Because I totally am. Do you know game designers mainly work off of spreadsheets? Nice dress. Want a drink? Good looking women can get paid to give talks around the world. You would make a good event speaker. Women have it so easy nowadays with all these women in games organizations and women only funds. It's easier to be a woman now than it is to be a man. We all know the only reason you got invited was because you're a woman. Hey, I run this publishing house. Please me and I might give you a publishing deal. Thank you so much for inviting me. I look up to you so much. All the games that come out of here are so good. You're so talented. I also make my own games. Want to see? Hey, you're one of the new girls, right? Welcome to the industry. We're like a family here. We always have each other's backs. We've got to help each other reach for the stars. Right? We each have our own passions. What are you passionate about? Well, I love asking people this question. I feel there's so much you can learn about people and about the world from that question. The other day, I asked this man who was an expert in search optimization, which is something I didn't know much about, but it's actually fascinating. I don't understand how these indie companies do without marketing experts. Really. I think I get it. It's tough being an indie, but this guy could really make a massive difference to your sales figures. He's such a jackpot to have on your team. Play nice and you might get to meet him. Thanks, but I really should go. Yeah, sure. You should really get to know all the guys here. They're all super talented, and I'm so proud to call them my mates. I met George, who runs all this, at one of Mark's rooftop parties. Have you been to those? I guess not. I would have remembered you. They're some of the best parties. Anyone who's anyone gets invited to his parties. I met Mark at a pool party in San Francisco. We had some drinks and instantly hit it off. We talked for hours about each other's lives. That guy leads such an amazing life. He invited me to his rooftop party, and we've been best mates ever since. If he ever invites you to his rooftop, you should totally take him up on the offer. He's such a nice guy and so well connected. Okay, but I really should go. Make sure to try out the Jaeger bombs while you're here, while you're at it. They make really nice ones, although the best cocktails are always at the exclusive industry parties. If they ever invite you, make sure to try their White Russians. That's actually where I met Luke. Oh, sorry, my friend is calling me. I gotta take this. You look great, by the way. Your husband must be a lucky man. Oh, you don't feel comfortable? Well, I really don't see where this is coming from. We're all nice guys. That's a very aggressive thing to say. Maybe it's best if we don't invite you back. The end. So that was A Woman Goes to a Private Games Industry Party. Rosa Carbo Mascarell. And so that's an example of a Bitsy game, which you may already be familiar with. But Bitsy, Twine, there's a whole variety of wonderful tools out there that are free, that are where the learning curve is a little more accessible than game making tools have been in the past. And what's really exciting about that to me is it's really opened up game development to a much wider array of creators. And so Bitsy if you kind of seek out Bitsy games and the community of creators, you'll find games that let you experience all kinds of different scenarios, all kinds of different tones and styles of writing, some really personal stories and experiences, and kind of vignette games. And a lot of them really effectively use sort of embodiment of a character walking around a space in really memorable ways. So I'm not actually going to play Papers, Please because I think it's of the games that I'm have kind of picked out in this list of examples. It's probably one of the more well-known ones, but yeah, it's definitely worth a play. It's an excellent game, but I'm going to continue on past it. I did also highlight during the Protest Games workshop some bundles, including some charity bundles and also some that were collections of work from marginalized creators. And this is one that has been coming out on an annual basis. That's definitely worth a look. The Queer Games bundle. It's really excellent games by a variety of wonderful creators in here. Um, so that's just a recommendation. Similarly, I'm not going to play Dysphoria. It's a little bit hard to find like a version of. I think that Anna Anthropy, the creator of the game, from what I can tell, has sort of taken it down, but it's been like rehosted elsewhere. But I'm not going to play it in one of those spots. But this was a game from kind of the Flash era. It's going back a few years now. That was had a similar element to what I see these days in like the Bitsy community. For example, it was had a lot of kind of short vignettes that were all dealing with a similar topic of this experience of going through hormone replacement therapy and dealing with gender dysphoria. And yeah, it was really memorable depiction of that I think used games in a really well designed, well presented way to reinforce this very personal story. So if you can find a good way to play that, then I do recommend it. Games can tackle serious topics and themes. So this is a little brief excerpt from a game called Howling Dogs by a Twine author, Porpentine. And this is a game that deals with some really interesting themes of, at least for me when I played it, sort of misogyny and patriarchy were some kind of themes that came across to me, but you should play it for yourself and draw your own conclusions because there's a lot of space within this, just some incredible writing, really poignant and subtle in terms of how it deals with the themes that it deals with, and it's worth the playthrough. And we may come back to that one. I'm gonna maybe save that for last and see how much time we have. But that's a great one that you can check out on your own. Howling Dogs by Porpentine. Okay, yes. So this is a game called To My Firstborn Son from a creator who goes by Ink Repair. And they're an extremely prolific creator of indie games. If you go to their website, which is inkrepair.com, you can see that there are many, 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 many games that they've created. And this is not a matter of quantity over quality because these games are some of the most like wildly inventive experimental games that I've ever encountered. And To My Firstborn Son is one that I particularly enjoy from this creator, although that is a long list. And I think we will check that out if I can figure out how to stream it, but may require me to do some adjusting here. I'm going to at least download it, and we'll go from there. Okay. Let's try this and see how it goes. I'm gonna need to do some switching, so bear with me for a minute while I try to make sure that I'm streaming this properly. Okay. All right. We're getting somewhere. Bear with me for a minute. Graphics quality is good. Okay. We're gonna do a screen capture and hope for the best here. Actually, let's see if we can do this. Nope. Maybe, possibly. Okay. Let's see how this goes. Okay. Seems like it's working. Hoping that you can see this and hear this. And I have no idea what the mix is like, and I can't see chat to adjust it. But we're in some kind of hallway here. Boy is a source of joy. A new daughter is an excuse for slaughter. Oof. Mothers with infants keep their distance from fathers caught in sexual thought. Look at him with eyes marked round with bruises, as he chooses. Don't ask him to compromise with your failure as a wife. Just earnestly apologize for endangering your married life. A woman who lives to menopause is a woman without a cause. Better if her life's cut short, while heaving in a birthing court. You can't control your womanhood or change your nature, but your husband, if he's good, will make you whole and understood. I fought to vote. They cut my throat, forced down a pipe to save my life, because I must have been someone's wife. The violent feeding left my grams bleeding, and I stayed galled till we prevailed. I didn't read that one very well. Apologies. When it comes bleeding, I stayed jailed till we prevailed. My girl, don't think a wink. Don't question ever or try be clever. Don't put on airs and say your prayers that you might marry an actuary. Your lovely breasts are predisposed to lumps and bumps that grow and grow. You should not drink, but if you do, find a man to buy it for you. No daughter of mine will ever opine about anything other than perfume and wine. No patriarch can ever enslave my body or my woman's soul. My battles won won't be undone, nor will I ever lose control, nor leave my sisters in the dark. The end. Okay, that was To My Firstborn Son by Stephen Lavelle, also known as Ink Repair. And yeah, I really love that one for a number of reasons. It does make me wonder. Some of the snippets of text do feel disturbingly plausible, like they might be real excerpts from things from various eras based on the spelling, or they could just be written in that style. I honestly don't know. I also just love this kind of abstract space with these spectral figures and the way that navigating this 3D space is utilized in the game to sort of suggest the themes and reinforce them. Yeah, and I just like the sort of abstraction of it while still being very direct in terms of the text, certainly. Um, the environment is very haunting. It's something that's always stayed with me. So, yeah, if you liked that one, I can't recommend the work of Ink Repair highly enough. There's a treasure trove of other great experimental games at inkrepair.com. Again, these are some things like with the zine, uh, the casual games for protest. This is one that won't be so easy for us to play on stream necessarily, but the New Games movement and some of their work, including the New Games book, is worth a look for anybody who's interested in looking at examples of how the design of games can encode cultural values and ideas and kind of foster dynamics and player experiences that will help players practice those ideas. These were games that were created by some folks who were aiming to create games that would teach countercultural values, including so you'll see a lot of the design of these games is more around like cooperative play as compared to games that are focused on competing with other people or like defeating people, or sort of like winning and conquest and all these things, because you could argue whether so many games are like that because it's part of human nature, or if it's so many games are like that because that's the context in which we find ourselves living in our political and economic systems, and so our games sort of reflect that and reinforce that. So this was an attempt to kind of push back on that, and yeah, just allow players to practice different values, different ways of interacting. So it's worth a look, and that's about all I can show you about it here on the stream. Similarly, so on a similar note, games can, of course, facilitate positive social interactions. They can certainly also facilitate negative social interactions. And for people who do and don't play games, that you might be, have some examples of negative interactions in games in mind. But there are also games that do facilitate positive interactions between people. And these are two that came to mind. One I'm not going to play because it's not really an appropriate game to stream, which is Kind Words. I say that because Kind Words is essentially an interface for encouraging people to reach out and just express things that they're struggling with. Potentially personal things. It's an anonymized, sort of interface for doing it. But if you're troubled by something or struggling with something, you can play Kind Words and express the way you're feeling about it, and then other players of the game will be encouraged to respond to you. And the game is set up in a way to try to foster as much kind of mutual support and positive, encouraging interaction as possible. So I know a lot of people who really benefited from it at all times, but certainly during the time it came out, which was, right around the time of the first lockdowns for COVID. It was really a well timed, timely game. It was made a lot of positive difference in people's lives. And there are some other great games as well for doing similar things with sort of in-person interactions. I will just show the website for kind words, which I should have done while I was talking about it. Um, but yeah, um, great game, great design. And this is Where Should We Begin? A Game of Stories by Esther Peel. This is a card game that has a number of discussion prompts. So it's sort of what you might think of as almost like a bit of an icebreaker activity. But a lot of icebreaker activities I've found are more keeping things on the shallow end. Like they're helping people introduce themselves to one another, but they might be just telling people to talk about what they do for a living or this or that. Whereas Where Should We Begin has a lot more prompts that are encouraging people to share more personal things and like things that are a little bit more prompts for introspection, but introspection that you then like share with other people. So like share something that's changed your worldview. Share something you wouldn't tell your coworkers, right? So presumably you'd be playing that game in a context with somebody other than your coworkers. A rule I secretly love to break. A dream I've never shared, right? So yeah, there's a whole bunch of these, and I think it could just be a really good way to uh, help people get to know each other a little better in a variety of contexts, provided, of course, that everybody is consenting to play and nobody is being like pressured to share anything more personal than they're comfortable sharing. Um, so yeah, that's Where Should We Begin. Along similar lines, I think online games can really be a conduit for both positive and negative interactions, just interactions between people, period. But I know a lot of friends of mine um, who struggle with uh, social anxiety or just yeah, like kind of connecting, like just starting conversations and feeling comfortable having conversations with people they don't know in like a real world social setting, who have an easier time for a variety of reasons doing that through the interface of a computer and an online game, and being able to have more control over, you know, how they're what kind of character they're embodying within that world, and have more control over when to like more easily exit the situation, and so on. So there are a lot of things that can kind of help about the interface of online games and help people to make friends, and feel less isolated, and that's really important. So again, you could think of that as protest game or not, but I do think it's an important function of games, that can maybe be useful if you're wanting to build your own sort of protest game. Yeah, and I mentioned that I had linked in this presentation to some different causes, and different like game bundles that had raised money for causes. So I think that's another way that games can support groups that are doing work for social change and for the benefit of marginalized communities. Is even if the game itself, if you make a game that has nothing to do with protest or a political topic, you could still group your game in as a bundle with other creators for a charitable cause, and you know not just like have to raise awareness of something through your own work, but you could like raise some money for organizations that are doing concrete work related to that topic. So I'm gonna just go back a little bit to, since we have a little over half hour here, I think that leaves us with some time to check out Howling Dogs, which might be, let me just see if I skipped over anything that I really wanted to. Yeah, aside from maybe checking out some Molly Industria games as well. I'll pull up Molly Industria as well. So I didn't kind of show their page, but you can kind of see if you just take a look at like some of the titles for their games that they really focus on political topics pretty heavily and in a very effective, skillful way. So I know that Taro and some of the other Tech Valley GameSpace folks are fond of To Build a Better Mousetrap. The first game that I had ever played by Molly Industria was this game Every Day the Same Dream about alienation and refusal of labor, which definitely stuck with me ever since. But there's many other great examples here. And the one that I played most recently was A Prison Strike. As you know what, as long as we're here, so we'll still save Howling Dogs for last. Let's just do A Prison Strike because I know how long it is, and it's a quick one. Game poem about mass incarceration and invisibility. Here we go. Once again, you'll see a familiar interface here. This is another Bitsy game. So, okay. Prison Strike, August 2018. Sorry, folks, bear with me for just a sec. We'll dive in just a moment here. Okay, here we go. A Prison Strike, August 2018. I can't see a human life. Declared beyond repair. Fade away in a cell. I can't see a kid sold for cash. Bail unpaid. Growing criminal behind bars. I can't see the hunger, the anger of inmates on strike, affirming by withdrawing all they have left. I can't see the many worlds unborn by taxes spent on torture instead of nurture. I can't see the theories holding this together. Sunk rebars in concrete, unbroken windows, tolerance at zero. I can't see an architecture overflowing with black, brown, white bodies in measures mean against melanin. I can't see the floors where made in America is made by unmade Americans. I can't see the office where slavery is modernized, 2 dimes an hour, and subsidized. I can't see the white fright, the imagination that stops and frisks, and even kills before Miranda speaks. I can't see a broken town of laid-off workers going all in, half-guarded, half-guards. I can't see a country in its whole, so exceptional, to disappear millions and still hate. I can't see any of this with my own eyes, but I don't need to. So that was a prison strike by Molly Industria. One of many excellent political games and what I would consider protest games that they've developed. So, that still gives us just under half hour. May or may not be enough time for Howling Dogs, but let's at least check out a bit of it. So as noted, Howling Dogs is a Twine game by Porpentine. And Twine games, as some of you will probably already know, are generally played through text and clicking on links to make choices. So here we go. One morning at dawn, the nurse shook him awake because his sobs were being heard in the next room. Once he was awake, he could hear that not only was the patient next door, but the 200 dogs kept in the hospital courtyard for use in the laboratory had also been threatened by his sobbing and clearly were howling still. Nonetheless, he thought to himself, I am only dreaming. Besides, I'm already fully conscious of the significance of those howling dogs because I've written about them. This is no time for howling dogs. Oe Kenzaburo. A room of dark metal, fluorescent lights embedded in the ceiling. The activity room is in the north wall. The lavatory entrance, west, next to the trash disposal and the nutrient dispensers. The sanity room is in the east wall. Her photograph is pinned to the side of your bunk. A red LCD reads 367, a few inches over. Every day you think of ways this photo could have been improved. Better lighting, better surroundings, closer to see the subtleties in her expression, further back to see her form and better imagine embracing her. Let's see. Sanity room. Immersed in a room where every surface is glowing screen. A meadow of green grass and breezy flowers. The wind rises and falls with your heartbeat. In the distance, a thin strip of forest. Tiny metal toilet and shallow bowl of sink jutting from pipes. The shower is a vertical indentation in the wall separated by a clear plastic screen. Your room is outside. A small panel that you drop your trash through. Took a long time before you thought to put your arm down the disposal. You listened first. Listened to the bottle rolling down. Made sure nothing sharp and metal was whirring inside. Just a long chute and you can't hear the bottom. That is the news. You have already cleaned up your trash. A reclining chair in a dark room with a visor hanging from the ceiling. The visor won't release if you don't eat and drink first. The wall is fitted with a food dispenser and a hydration unit. You press the button. A sealed nutrient bar slides out. You sit down on the floor and peel the wrapper. It has a mildly spiced vegetal flavor. And now we have a wrapper sticking to the floor. I guess we need to also hydrate. You press the button. A bottle of ice water rolls down. You return to your bunk and drink it up. Now we have a bottle and a wrapper on the floor. A reclining chair in a dark room with a visor hanging from the ceiling. You sit down and pull the visor over your head. The visor interior is soft and enveloping. You squeeze the drip tube between your teeth, and sickly sweet fluid floods your mouth. Pulses fire into your retinas. A certain person was tasked with describing a garden for the records of an empire. To assure objectivity, they were shown this garden through a slit in a piece of opaque black paper. Through the slit you see spear-like green stalks, flowering with tightly knotted purple flowers. A narrow stream winds through the garden. You feel certain that the garden permits a feeling of privacy and enclosure at regular intervals despite the relatively small size of the garden, due to the height and closeness of the stalks, as well as the gentle canopy of long green leaves proliferating from their tips. You can smell the sweetness of the flowers and the freshness of the leaves and water. Your nose scrapes against the slit as you press closer to inhale more deeply. So we have 3 different choices here. Describe aesthetically. This garden was certainly created by a soul in accord with heaven. Surely spirits dwell in this verdant shrine, this majestic expanse of purple buds hanging with wind-wet leaves. I am overcome. We could describe bureaucratically. This is a regulation garden in every aspect, save for the tallness of the stalks. The stalks extend at least 12 thumbs above standard. Or we could describe horticulturally. The stalks are in full health from leaf to flower. Water runs through in seemingly haphazard curves, but closer observation reveals excellent coverage of the entire garden. Pruning and sweeping seems to be done in a timely manner. Right away, this is a more interesting type of decision than many games I've played ever provide. I don't know why I have this selection, but I'm just going to pick the one that appeals to me at the moment, and that's to describe aesthetically. The Empress gives special consideration to this garden, granting the owner an imperial stipend for maintenance and expansion. The garden's special stalks, bred by the owner herself, proliferate to fill the entirety of her grounds. Ho hum. It becomes known in later years of decadence that the purple flowers of this stalk are an opiate. Or was it? When the stalks reach the soil of the surrounding countryside, their hidden quality is revealed. So, again, the things that we have to click on here are interesting. An opiate or hidden quality is revealed. The mystery is interesting here. Uh, let's do opiate. Let's do opiate, kids. The surrounding countryside becomes a place of paranoia and bloodshed as warlords fight for control of the garden. Shouts and sudden downswing of some sharp and heavy, wearisomely edged, grippable, heftable. You can hold it in two arms or one. It can at any rate be lifted from the earth thing. Then the smell of sap and copper through channels of threshed stalks. Sleep. A room of dark metal, fluorescent lights embedded in the ceiling. We have our same locations as before. Her photograph is pinned to the side of your bunk. A red LCD reads 368, a few inches over. The longer you stare, the less you see. It's been so long. That's depressing. Let's take out the trash. You carry your trash over to the disposal chute, open the panel, and shove it inside. There we go. Much better. Immersed in a room where every surface is glowing screen. Bamboo stalks bend in the breeze. Glimpses of the sea where they part. The floor is polished white riverbed stones. Don't mind me, I'm just full screening. I hope that you can still see. I probably should have full screened long ago, but I didn't. We're going to pause for one moment. I'm just going to take a moment in my own sanity room, and I shall return. 1 second. Okay, I'm back from the sanity room. Right, we need to eat and drink. Let's try the shower. You step into the shower and let the 2-minute water ration wash away the faint film of sweat and dead skin cells. When the timer runs out, hot air blows from a vent and dries you off. The shower is a peaceful time for you, a way of delineating limited space, moisture, and temperature, standing in for spatiality. This is wet space, warm space, flowing space. All right. You press the button. A sealed nutrient bar slides out. You sit down on the floor and peel the wrapper. It has a mildly spiced vegetal flavor. The wrapper sticks to the floor. You press the button. A bottle of ice-cold water rolls down. You return to your bunk and drink it up. A reclining chair in a dark room with a visor hanging from the ceiling. You sit down and pull the visor over your head. The visor interior is soft and enveloping. You squeeze the drip tube between your teeth and sickly sweet fluid floods your mouth. Pulses fire into your retinas. We are lying in bed in the large, rectangular, brutalist structure on the moor, and the quality of light is soft and blue. The sky through the window is obscured by soft gray clouds shot with silver. The moor is gray-green. The phone is vibrating under the blanket, muffled enough to ignore if you will keep holding me. I say light, but a better phrase would be capacity to behold irrespective of light. I cannot say whether the bedroom was lit at all or merely seen, which is not the same. Let's ignore. The silence gathers around our bodies like fleece, like static. I wonder if you can hear it too. But I think the events of last year disproved anything so romantic as our bodies and minds being as one. You are not my limb, though you writhe when I change position. You are not my hair, though you hang past my shoulders and onto my breasts. You are something I digest and shit out. Something warm I leave behind that becomes cold, then decomposes into the rich soil of my perception. I am the eternal forest, forever blossoming, forever rushing from the earth to drag sun into my branches. Beyond me are dead trees and mulch, and further on, increate fog. You do not deserve to touch this body or occupy my thoughts. My thoughts die at the gate of my mouth. They are poison inside me. I am paralyzed. It seems we are always repeating. We are lying in bed in a large rectangular brutalist structure on the moor, and the quality of light is soft and blue. The sky through the window is obscured by soft gray clouds shot with silver. The moor is gray-green. The phone is vibrating under the blanket, muffled enough to ignore if you will keep holding me. I lie there as you answer the phone. After a few seconds, you look out the window. The rest of the house is empty. Something like alcohol fire smears itself across the window pane. You draw the blind shut. The capacity of the room to be beheld fades until our forms on the bed are like a slit of white flesh in the side of a black fish. I wander through certain unspecified identical floors and passages of thick concrete on the way to the bathroom, which, despite being the only significant room in the house besides the kitchen and the bedroom, is nowhere near the others. Outside the bedroom, I can think freely about the events of last year. More than 300 days have elapsed, so how strange that only now would I be driven to kill you. The house is naked and nothing can be hidden in it. You had it built that way, and you let nothing in except for the few things we needed to live, and their shapes were not for secrecy. Thoroughfare objects with high traffic, pans always messy and steaming with pasta, though I once fantasized about plucking a knife from the boiling water and slipping it into your heart, and clear pitchers full of water, and the flat-screen television, and a bed flush with the ground. No child or woman could hide herself or anything else beneath it. Regardless, I found the lone error the builders made, and in that gap of misjudged proportions I hid my friend, the coiled cord, a snake that rises at certain times, such odd times it must be admitted, but those are the facts. Would you help me kill him? No? Then you will watch. Come. The cord is so tiny in my palm that I am trembling by the time I reach the threshold of the bedroom. I feel as if I have deceived myself, that I have been clutching some rubbish the whole time, a bit of dust or delusory shoestring that is drowning in the sweat of my palm, and I will release it like a bird that tells the heavens to strike me. It would be better to die than to think in such a way all the time, don't you think, for over 300 days since the events of last year? Yes. He asks where I've been. I want to scream, where could I have gone? Where? I say something correct and slide into bed. After some time he seems to be asleep. I test the cord under the blanket. It is strong and supple. I slowly make a noose with my fingers, disguising each movement as the natural shift of a body slumbering. I slip the noose over his head. He inhales sharply in the way he does when he is woken up instantly. His body rolls back against me. I pull with no hesitation. We pull tight and form a tiny knot at the nape of his neck that no fingers can undo in the span of time that is a lung's air capacity. I'm fascinated by the size of the knot, a speck to fell this minotaur. I run from his death throes and open every window and door in the house. The cold moor wind floods in, and the flap of curtains is fluttering applause. The slap of my bare feet on the floor, and I am passing through corridors braced with breeze, and I am at the door. Sleep. We're back to a room of dark metal with fluorescent lights embedded in the ceiling. Red LCD reads 369. There is so much struggle with memory for what seems like so little output. Let's go to the sanity room. Immersed in a room where every surface is glowing screen. A road winding through winter woods. Aspen trees glazed with moonlight. Gentle flurries. Gotta clean the trash. You carry your trash over to the disposal chute, open the panel, and shove it inside. You press the button. A sealed nutrient bar slides out. You sit down on the floor and peel the wrapper. It has a sweet, honeyed meat flavor. You press the button. A bottle of ice-cold water rolls down. You return to your bunk and drink it up. A reclining chair in a dark room with a visor hanging from the ceiling. You sit down and pull the visor over your head. The visor interior is soft and enveloping. You squeeze the drip tube between your teeth and sickly sweet fluid floods your mouth. Pulses fire into your retinas. Your shoulders hit hard sides, narrow, wooden, dark. Grains of dirt grind at your back as you brace against the lid. You can't see the sky, just a lot of smoke and fumes and searchlight beams. Things are whistling down. From far away they look like black seeds, then faster, then reaction, they slam, howling into the dirt, a thunderslap of splinters and soil. The drop coffins are falling. Rapidly shifting dimensions of war haze. Sometimes the smoke is high enough to be mistaken for the sky, sometimes it collapses low as a cavern. High above the martial vapors, you know the death ship is rattling gantries and frames to release more invaderly cargo. This day was long coming. Your sisters in death crunch to the surface of this doomed planet. Don't you think this is a bit morbid? Or into battle. A hurtling mortar says that it saves processing power to merge the death element. The trenches ask whether you wish to continue. Well, we have just a few minutes left, so I don't think we are going to complete Howling Dogs. But I hope that this little taste has intrigued you enough to play the rest for yourself. It's not a massively long game. I would say we've gone through somewhere between a quarter and half up to this point. But there are many interesting twists and turns to come. Let's just proceed through this bit, or at least maybe one more portion of it. You charge over the ridge in deathly ululation, brandishing a spine-furred slicer fit to drag the flesh from skin havers. Flashes of buffering red and black. You charge over the ridge in deathly ululation. Yes. Skits of blood and clouds of shadow and fume. The colony of the living rises before you. They've dragged those living pillars they call trees and arranged them in walls. Reliquary tanks, piloted by giant saint skulls, crash over the nearest hill and unload earth-shaking rounds into the settlement palisade, blowing apart their pathetic barriers. You climb through the wreckage and find some living souls to harvest, or I don't feel comfortable with this. I think in the interest of time and propriety, let's say I don't feel comfortable with this. You can make the decision for yourself if you decide to play the game for yourself. The mud is analyzing alternatives. You're sitting at a fine table sipping tea. The carnage continues at a muted volume, tanks flowing through you in ghostly procession. Across from you, a charming and influential socialite is fanning herself and begging you to try the biscuits. Are you really seeing her? Your gaze slides off the contours of her face, a socialite abstracted, a source of beauty and wit absorbed like waves of heat. She just isn't all there. We must try the biscuits. We simply must. They're delicious. All right. We're back to our room of dark metal, and this is where we will leave off. And this is also where I will leave you, given that it is now 5:59 p.m. Eastern Time by my clock. Thank you if you did tune in to watch me play some protest games or just interesting games that I like. or however you want to classify them. I appreciate you taking the time to check them out with me. And as a reminder, please do visit extralife.org/team/TVGS to check out our progress and support our efforts to raise some funds for Albany Med Children's Hospital. And as a reminder on top of the reminder, be sure to also check out pixelsforprogress.org if you're interested in meeting up with some fellow creators and potential collaborators and just people who are interested in games and interested in trying to affect positive change in the world and possibly doing those two things together somehow. Maybe you'll meet some lifelong friends or just some temporary collaborators, or maybe you'll just chat with some folks and hang out. But either way, we'd love to have you join our Discord. Pixelsforprogress.org is the site, and the Pixels for Progress Civic Engagement Game Jam is running from now through December 16th, when we'll be doing a virtual closing ceremony where everybody who made games for the jam will get to showcase their work and talk about their creative process. So, thanks again. I hope you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful extra life. And we will catch you on the flip side. I believe that our other team members for Team TVGS are still streaming, including Taro. So check out our team page and go say hello to them and cheer them on and maybe throw them a donation. Thanks again. Take care.